The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dense jungle. The air was thick with humidity, and the sound of buzzing insects filled the silence between footsteps. A group of humans moved cautiously through the unfamiliar terrain, their boots crunching softly on the damp soil beneath them. They were explorers, sent to investigate strange energy readings coming from this uncharted planet deep in the Andromeda galaxy. None of them had any idea what they would find here or if they would even make it back alive. Jake Monroe adjusted the strap of his backpack as he scanned the area ahead. He was an engineer by trade, a man known for his ability to fix anything. That broke, his hands were steady, his mind sharp, and his confidence unwavering. But today, standing in the middle of this alien wilderness, Jake felt uneasy. Something about this place didn't sit right with him. It wasn't just the towering trees or the eerie quiet that came after the insect buzzes died down. There was something else, something lurking just out of sight. Behind him. Laura Drake held her scanner close to her chest, her eyes darting nervously around the group. She was a biologist, fascinated by life in all its forms, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lived here might not take kindly to visitors. Ryan Cole led the way, his rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. As the mission leader, Ryan prided himself on being calm under pressure, but even he seemed tense today. Every step forward felt like walking into the unknown, and none of them could deny the weight of the danger hanging over their heads. They had been traveling for hours when the first sign of trouble appeared. The ground trembled slightly, almost imperceptibly at first, but enough to catch Jake's attention. "Did you feel that?" he asked, stopping mid-stride. Laura nodded, clutching her scanner tighter. Ryan raised a hand to signal silence, his gaze scanning the trees around them. Then they heard a low growl, deep and guttural, emanating from somewhere nearby. The sound sent chills racing down their spines. Whatever it was big. Too big to ignore. Slowly, Ryan motioned for the team to move closer together, forming a tight circle as they prepared for whatever might emerge from the shadows. And then it came. A massive figure stepped into view, breaking through the foliage with ease. It stood taller than any of them, its sleek, reptilian body glistening under the dim light filtering through the canopy above. Its skin was covered in jagged scales, each one gleaming like polished stone. Razor-sharp claws extended from its fingers, glinting menacingly as it flexed its hands. Two glowing eyes locked onto the group, studying them with predatory interest. For a moment, no one moved. Time seemed to freeze as the creature tilted its head, almost as if it were amused by their presence. Then, without warning, it let out a loud guttural laughter sound so unnatural that it made Jake's stomach churn. It wasn't just laughter, it was mockery, pure and simple. This thing wasn't afraid of them. If anything, it viewed them as insignificant pests, unworthy of its time. Jake swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. He fumbled with the translation device strapped to his belt, hoping to establish some kind of communication. "Maybe we can reason with it," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But before he could activate the device, the creature lunged forward with terrifying speed. 1 second, Jake was standing beside Laura, and the next, he found himself pinned against a tree, the alien's clawed hand wrapped tightly around his throat. Panic surged through him as he struggled to breathe, his legs kicking uselessly in the air. The creature leaned in close, its hot breath washing over him as it laughed again, louder this time. The sound echoed through the forest, drowning out everything else. Laura screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "Let him go," she shouted, though her words fell on deaf ears. Ryan raised his rifle, aiming carefully at the creature's head, but hesitated. One wrong shot could mean disaster not just for Jake, but for all of them. Just when it seemed like there was no hope left, another roar split the air. This one was different, deeper, angrier, and far more primal. The alien predator froze, its grip loosening slightly as it turned its head toward the source of the noise. That split second was all Jake needed. With every ounce of strength he had left, he drove his knee upward, striking the creature's arm and forcing it to release him. He dropped to the ground, gasping for air as he scrambled backward. From the shadows emerged a new figure, one that made the alien predator pause. It was humanoid, but barely. Covered in scars and dirt, the newcomer looked like he had been carved out of stone. His muscles rippled with every movement, and the crude weapons strapped to his back spoke volumes about his violent past. This was Caleb Stone, a man who had earned the nickname Deathworlder because of where he came from, and what he had survived. Caleb wasted no time. Without hesitation, he charged at the alien predator, drawing a massive blade from his side. The two collided with a force that shook the ground beneath them. Their movements too fast for the human eye to follow completely. Sparks flew as metal met claw, and blood splattered across the clearing as Caleb fought with brutal efficiency. Each strike was calculated, each dodge precise. He moved like a storm, relentless and unstoppable. Jake watched in awe, his heart pounding. In his chest, beside him, Laura clutched her scanner like a lifeline, while Ryan kept his rifle trained on the battle, ready to intervene if necessary. But it quickly became clear that Caleb didn't need their help. Finally, with one swift motion, Caleb grabbed the alien by the throat and yanked it downward, driving his blade straight through its neck. Blood sprayed everywhere as the creature let out a final gurgling cry before collapsing to the ground. The laughter was gone, replaced by silence. Breathing heavily, Caleb turned to face the group, his expression unreadable. Jake stared at him, still shaken from the encounter. What are you? He managed to stammer, his voice trembling. Caleb didn't answer immediately. Instead, he wiped the blood off his blade and fixed the group with a hard stare. You shouldn't be here, he said gruffly, his voice carrying a tone of warning. This place will kill you faster than you think. No one spoke. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of just how dangerous this mission truly was. For now, they were alive, but for how much longer? The group stood frozen, staring at the man who had just saved their lives. Caleb Stone was covered in dirt, sweat, and blood, not all of it his own. His scars told stories of battles fought and survived, each one a testament to his resilience. He looked like someone who had been through hell and come out the other side, carrying pieces of it with him. Jake couldn't help but feel both gratitude and unease as he studied Caleb's face. There was something about him, something wild and untamed, that made Jake wonder if they'd simply traded one predator for another. Laura broke the silence first. Thank you, she said softly, her voice shaking slightly. Us. Caleb glanced at her briefly before turning his attention back to the jungle around them. He didn't say anything, but his body language spoke volumes. Every muscle in his frame was tense, ready to move at a moment's notice. He wasn't relaxing, not even for a second. Ryan stepped forward, his rifle still gripped firmly in his hands. Who are you? He demanded, his tone sharp and authoritative. It was clear he didn't trust Caleb, and Jake couldn't blame him. They knew nothing about this man except that he could kill an alien predator with terrifying efficiency. Caleb finally turned to look at Ryan, his piercing eyes locking onto the leader's face. Name's Caleb, he said flatly, and I already told you you shouldn't be here. Jake cleared his throat, trying to ease the tension. We're explorers, he explained quickly. We came here because of some strange energy readings. We didn't expect that. He gestured toward the lifeless body of the alien predator lying nearby. The sight of it sent a fresh wave of dread coursing through him. Caleb snorted, a dry, humorless sound. Energy readings, huh? Figures. Always chasing shiny things without thinking about the consequences. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath that no one could quite catch. Laura took a cautious step closer, her curiosity getting the better of her. How do you know so much about this place? She asked. Her voice was gentle, almost soothing, as though she were trying to coax a wild animal into trusting her. Caleb hesitated before answering. For a moment, it looked like he might ignore the question entirely. But then he sighed, running a hand over his scarred face. I've been stuck here for years, he admitted gruffly. Crashed my ship during a smuggling run. Haven't found a way off yet. Years. Jake blinked in surprise. How had this man survived on such a dangerous planet for so long? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. If Caleb could endure this place, maybe there was hope for them after all. Ryan frowned, clearly skeptical. If you've been stranded here, why haven't you tried to signal for help? Why stay hidden? Caleb's expression darkened, and for a split second, Jake thought he saw anger flicker in his eyes. Because signaling means attracting attention, Caleb replied coldly, and trust me, you don't want the kind of attention this planet gives. That answer hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. None of them dared to ask what he meant by that. Instead, Laura pressed on with her questions, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. What can you tell us about these creatures? Are there more of them? Caleb shrugged, stepping away from the group to retrieve his blade from the dead predator's neck. He cleaned it carefully on the creature's scales before sliding it back into its sheath. There's always more, he said simply. This whole planet is crawling with things that'll rip you apart if you give them half a chance. That's why I said you shouldn't be here. Jake exchanged a glance with Laura, who looked pale but determined. We can't leave now, she said firmly, not without finding the source of those energy readings. It could be important, maybe even groundbreaking. Caleb raised an eyebrow at that, his lips curling into a faint smirk. Groundbreaking, huh? You scientists always think you're doing something noble. But let me tell you something. Leaving well enough alone is smarter than digging up secrets you don't understand. His words struck a chord with Jake, who couldn't help but wonder if Caleb had a point. Still, they hadn't come all this way just to turn back empty. We need to keep going, Jake said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. If you know this place as well as you claim, maybe you can guide us, help us avoid trouble. Caleb stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a low, bitter sound that sent chills down Jake's spine. Guide you? You really don't get it, do you? Trouble doesn't wait for you here. Trouble hunts you down. Despite his harsh words, Caleb didn't refuse outright. Instead, he crossed his arms and studied the group, his gaze lingering on each of them in turn. Finally, he let out a resigned sigh. Fine, I'll take you as far as I can, but don't expect me to hold your hands when things go south, and they will. This planet doesn't forgive mistakes. Relief washed over Jake, though he couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a deal with the devil. Still, having Caleb on their side, Evan reluctantly was better than facing this nightmare alone. With Caleb leading the way, the group set off again, moving deeper into the jungle. The atmosphere was tense, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig setting their nerves on edge. Caleb moved with confidence, his steps sure and deliberate. He seemed to know exactly where to go, weaving through the dense foliage with ease. Behind him, the others followed closely, sticking close together like a herd of frightened animals. As they traveled, Caleb began sharing bits of information about the planet. He pointed out certain plants to avoid, warning them that some secreted toxins capable of melting flesh. He showed them how to identify safe water sources and explained which areas were most likely to harbor predators. His knowledge was vast, born from years of trial and error, and Jake couldn't help but marvel at how much he had learned just to survive. At one point, they came across a clearing littered with bones, human bones. Jake froze, his stomach twisting into knots as he stared at the skeletal remains scattered across the ground. Laura gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, while Ryan tightened his grip on his rifle. Only Caleb seemed unfazed, crouching beside the remains to examine them more closely. "Looks like another crew," he said casually, picking up a fragment of what might have once been a helmet. "Probably got careless. Or greedy." Jake felt sick. These people had come here just like them, full of hope and purpose, and now they were nothing more than scraps left behind by whatever horrors roamed this world. "How many others have died here?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Caleb shrugged. "Too many to count. Some make it a few days, others last a week. Eventually though, this place gets everyone." His blunt honesty was unsettling, but Jake appreciated it in a strange way. At least Caleb wasn't sugarcoating things. If anything, his warnings only reinforced the importance of staying vigilant. As night fell, the group set up camp in a small cave Caleb deemed relatively safe. The temperature dropped sharply, and the sounds of the jungle grew louder, more menacing. Jake sat huddled near the fire, watching as Caleb sharpened his blade with practiced strokes. Despite everything, there was something oddly comforting about having him around. For all his rough edges, Caleb exuded a sense of control that none of the others possessed. Before settling down for the night, Caleb gave them one final piece of advice. "Stay alert," he warned. "And whatever you do, don't wander off. Not unless you want to end up like those bones back there." No one argued. As they drifted off to sleep, the weight of Caleb's words lingered in the air, a grim reminder of the dangers lurking just beyond the firelight. The next morning, the group woke to the sound of distant growls echoing through the jungle. The fire they had built the night before had burned down to embers, casting a faint glow over their makeshift camp. Jake sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. As he tried to shake off the grogginess, he glanced around at the others. Laura was already awake, jotting notes in her small journal by the dim light. Ryan stood near the mouth of the cave, scanning the horizon with his rifle in hand. Caleb, however, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Caleb?" Jake asked, his voice low and cautious. The question seemed to jolt Ryan out of his thoughts. He turned to face Jake, his expression grim. "He went ahead to scout," Ryan replied. "Said it was better to check the path while we were still slow moving. Told us not to follow." Jake frowned but didn't argue. Caleb had proven himself capable so far, and if there was one thing Jake had learned about him, it was that he didn't waste time on unnecessary risks. Still, the idea of being separated from their guide made him uneasy. This planet was too unpredictable, too dangerous to trust blind luck. Laura closed her journal and stood, stretching her arms above her head. "We should probably pack up soon," she said softly. "If we want to catch up with Caleb, we can't afford to linger." Ryan nodded, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Agreed, but stay close. We don't know what's out there." They worked quickly, packing their gear and extinguishing the last traces of their fire. As they stepped out of the cave, the jungle greeted them with its usual oppressive humidity. The air felt heavier today, almost suffocating, and the dense canopy overhead blocked most of the sunlight. Shadows danced across the forest floor, making every movement seem like a potential threat. It wasn't long before they spotted Caleb waiting for them at the edge of a narrow trail. His arms were crossed and his sharp eyes scanned the trees around them. When he saw them approaching, he gave a curt nod but didn't smile or offer any reassurance. That wasn't his style. "This way," he said simply, turning to lead them deeper into the jungle. His pace was steady, neither too fast nor too slow, and the group followed closely behind him. Jake noticed how Caleb moved with purpose, his steps deliberate and calculated. Every now and then, he would pause to examine the ground or glance up at the treetops, as though reading signs invisible to the others. As they walked, Laura couldn't help but marvel at the alien flora surrounding them. Towering plants with bioluminescent leaves glowed faintly in the dim light, casting an eerie green hue over everything. Strange vines hung from the branches above, some twitching slightly as though alive. She pointed them out to Jake, her excitement barely contained. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "These plants, they're incredible. Some of them might even have medicinal properties." Jake nodded, though his attention was divided. While Laura focused on the beauty of their surroundings, Jake found himself more concerned with the dangers lurking within them. He kept one hand on the utility knife strapped to his belt, ready to defend himself if necessary. Ryan, meanwhile, stayed alert at the rear of the group, his rifle always at the ready. Caleb stopped suddenly, raising a hand to signal silence. The group froze, holding their breath as they listened intently. At first, all they could hear was the usual hum of insects and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. But then, faintly, came the sound of movement, something large and heavy crashing through the underbrush nearby. "Stay quiet," Caleb murmured, his voice barely audible. He crouched low, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. The others followed suit, pressing themselves against the nearest tree trunks for cover. Seconds later, a pack of creatures burst into view. They were smaller than the predator they had encountered before, but no less terrifying. Their sleek, feline-like bodies moved with unnatural speed, their glowing eyes scanning the area hungrily. Sharp teeth gleamed in their wide mouths, and their claws scraped against the ground as they prowled forward. Jake's heart raced as he watched them circle closer. One of the creatures sniffed the air, its head snapping toward their hiding spot. It let out a low growl, alerting the others. In an instant, chaos erupted. The creatures charged, their movements blurs of motion. Ryan reacted first, firing his rifle with precision. The crack of gunfire echoed through the jungle, startling birds into flight. One of the creatures dropped, lifeless, but the rest kept coming. Caleb sprang into action, unsheathing his blade, and meeting the nearest attacker head-on. His movements were fluid and brutal, each strike aimed to incapacitate or kill. Jake grabbed Laura's arm, pulling her further behind a thick tree trunk. "Stay down," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the commotion. He pulled out his utility knife, gripping it tightly as adrenaline surged through him. Laura clutched her scanner to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" she cried, her voice trembling. "We fight," Ryan barked, reloading his rifle. "Or we die." The battle was intense and chaotic. Caleb fought like a man possessed, taking down two more creatures with ruthless efficiency. Blood sprayed across the ground as he slashed and stabbed, his movements fueled by years of survival. Ryan continued firing, his shots finding their marks despite the chaos. Jake, unsure of what else to do, lunged at a creature that had broken past Caleb's defenses. He drove his knife into its side, feeling the sickening resistance of flesh and muscle. The creature let out a piercing screech before collapsing. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the last of the creatures fell. The jungle grew eerily silent once again, save for the sound of labored breathing and the occasional drip of blood hitting the ground. Caleb straightened, wiping sweat and blood from his brow. He surveyed the scene, his expression unreadable. "Everyone okay?" he asked gruffly. Jake nodded, though his hands were shaking. Laura managed a weak yes, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan simply checked his rifle, ensuring it was still functional. "That was too close," Jake said finally, breaking the silence. "We wouldn't have made it without you." Caleb didn't respond immediately. Instead, he knelt beside one of the fallen creatures, examining its body. After a moment, he stood and looked at the group. "You're learning," he said, his tone neutral, "but you're still relying too much on weapons. Out here, ammo runs out. Blades break. You need to use your head or you'll end up dead." His words stung, but Jake knew he was right. They had survived this time, but it was clear they couldn't count on brute force alone to keep them alive. Laura, who had been scribbling furiously in her journal during the lull, looked up at Caleb with newfound respect. "How do you do it?" she asked, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "How do you stay calm when everything feels like it's falling apart?" Caleb shrugged, his gaze distant. "Fear doesn't help you live," he said simply. "It gets you killed. Out here, you learn to focus on what matters. Staying alive, everything else is noise." The group fell silent after that, each lost in their own thoughts as they processed what had just happened. Caleb led them onward, his pace unchanged despite the recent violence. The jungle seemed darker now, the shadows thicker and more menacing. Yet, strangely, Jake felt a flicker of hope. They had faced death and survived. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this nightmare after all. Hours passed, and the terrain began to shift. The dense jungle gave way to rocky hills, their jagged surfaces cutting into the sky. Caleb slowed as they approached a massive cliffside, his eyes narrowing as he studied the landscape ahead. "There," he said, pointing toward a structure embedded in the rock face. It was ancient, its surface covered in strange symbols and markings that glowed faintly in the dim light. A crystalline core pulsed at its center, emitting waves of energy that made the air hum with electricity. Laura gasped, her scientific instincts kicking in. That's it, she breathed. That's the source of the energy readings. Jake stared at the structure, awestruck. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a relic of an advanced civilization long gone. For a moment, he forgot about the dangers surrounding them, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the discovery. Ryan, however, remained cautious. We don't know what's inside, he warned. Could be booby-trapped, could be dangerous. Caleb nodded in agreement. He's right. Whatever built this place wasn't human. And if history's taught me anything, it's that alien tech doesn't play nice with outsiders. Despite the warnings, the group pressed forward, drawn irresistibly toward the structure. As they approached, Jake felt a strange sensation wash over him, as though the very air was alive with power. He exchanged a glance with Laura, who looked equally mesmerized. Whatever secrets lay within, they were determined to uncover them even if it meant risking everything. The group stood at the entrance of the ancient structure, their breaths shallow as they took in its towering presence. The crystalline core embedded in the rock face pulsed rhythmically, casting an eerie glow over the jagged terrain. It was impossible not to feel a sense of awe, mixed with unease. This wasn't just a relic, it felt alive, as though it were watching them. Jake stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the glowing symbols etched into the surface. They shifted and shimmered, almost like liquid, forming patterns that defied logic. He reached out instinctively, wanting to touch them, but Caleb grabbed his wrist before he could. Don't, Caleb said sharply, his voice cutting through the silence. You don't know what'll happen if you mess with something you don't understand. Jake hesitated, pulling his hand back reluctantly. He glanced at Caleb, who still held his wrist tightly. There was no malice in the man's grip, only urgency. Jake nodded slowly, understanding the warning without needing further explanation. Laura, meanwhile, had already begun documenting everything she saw. Her scanner hummed softly as she moved it over the surface of the structure, capturing data that would later be analyzed back on Earth. They made it back. She spoke quietly to herself, muttering notes about the energy readings and the strange symbols. To her, this was more than just a discovery. It was a breakthrough that could redefine humanity's understanding of the universe. Ryan stayed near the edge of the group, scanning the surrounding area for any signs of danger. His rifle was slung loosely over his shoulder, but his finger hovered close to the trigger. He didn't trust this place or the technology within it, and he wasn't about to let his guard down. This thing looks like it hasn't been touched in centuries, Ryan said finally, breaking the tense silence. But that doesn't mean it's safe. We need to proceed carefully. Caleb nodded in agreement. Ancient tech is tricky, he added. Sometimes it works fine. Other times it kills you just for looking at it wrong. Despite the warnings, curiosity outweighed caution. Laura approached the entrance cautiously, her scanner picking up faint vibrations emanating from inside. The doorway itself was massive, far too large for any human-sized being. Its edges glowed faintly, pulsing in sync with the crystalline core. As she stepped closer, the ground beneath her feet trembled slightly, and the doorway began to widen, revealing a dark passageway beyond. It's letting us in, Laura whispered, her voice filled with wonder. It must recognize HFY, at least our intentions. Or it's setting a trap, Caleb muttered under his breath, though loud enough for everyone to hear. He adjusted the strap of his blade across his chest, ensuring it was within easy reach. Either way, we're walking into the unknown. The group exchanged uneasy glances, but ultimately decided to press forward. With Caleb leading the way, they entered the structure cautiously, their footsteps echoing softly against the smooth walls. The interior was dimly lit by faint bioluminescent veins running along the ceiling and floors, casting an otherworldly glow over everything. The air smelled metallic, tinged with something sharp and unfamiliar. As they ventured deeper, the corridor opened up into a vast chamber. At its center stood a massive machine, its design both intricate and alien. Strange mechanisms whirred and clicked, powered by the same energy source they had detected from orbit. Laura immediately rushed toward it, her excitement overriding her fear. This is incredible, she breathed, her hands trembling slightly as she examined the machine. It's some kind of generator or maybe a portal. The energy readings are off the charts. Jake joined her, studying the console-like panel attached to the side of the device. It was covered in the same shifting symbols they had seen outside, but these seemed to respond to touch. Tentatively, he pressed one of the glowing glyphs. Instantly, the entire chamber came alive with light and sound. Panels slid open, revealing hidden compartments filled with tools and components unlike anything they had ever seen. Above them, holographic projections flickered to life, displaying images of stars, planets, and galaxies. It's mapping the cosmos, Jake said, his voice tinged with awe. This thing isn't just a power source, it's a gateway, a way to travel across the galaxy. Ryan frowned, his skepticism evident. If it's so advanced, why did whoever built this abandon it? And where are they now? No one had an answer. The questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered and unsettling. Caleb remained silent, his arms crossed as he observed the scene. Something about this place bothered him, something deeper than just the obvious dangers. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he knew better than to ignore his instincts. Laura, oblivious to the tension building around her, continued exploring the chamber. She knelt beside a smaller console embedded in the floor, her scanner buzzing excitedly. "These symbols, they're instructions," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "If I can decode them, we might be able to activate the machine." Before anyone could stop her, she pressed a series of glyphs based on her initial analysis. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening hum, the machine roared to life. Lights flashed wildly, and the crystalline core began to pulse. Faster, growing brighter with each passing second. "What did you do?" Ryan demanded, stepping back as the ground shook beneath their feet. I thought I was activating it," Laura stammered, panic creeping into her voice. "I didn't mean to." Her words were cut off as alarms blared throughout the chamber. Automated defenses sprang into action, sending beams of energy shooting through the air. The group scrambled for cover, narrowly avoiding the deadly blasts. "Shut it down," Ryan shouted, firing his rifle at one of the drones that had emerged from the walls. The bullet ricocheted harmlessly off its metallic surface. "I'm trying," Laura cried, frantically pressing random glyphs on the console. But instead of deactivating the system, the machine grew even more unstable. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the temperature in the chamber rose sharply. Jake turned to Caleb, who was crouched behind a pillar, observing the chaos with calculating eyes. "We need your help," he yelled over the noise. Caleb didn't hesitate. He vaulted over the debris separating them, moving with precision despite the chaos around him. Reaching the console, he shoved Laura aside, not roughly, but firmly enough to make his point clear. His hands moved quickly, tracing the patterns of the symbols as though deciphering a language he had studied all his life. "Get ready to run," he warned, his voice low and urgent. Without waiting for a response, he pressed a sequence of glyphs. In rapid succession, the machine sputtered, its lights flickering erratically before dimming completely. The alarms ceased, and the drones froze mid-flight, collapsing to the ground like marionettes with their strings cut. For a moment, there was silence. The group stared at Caleb, stunned by what he had just done. Even Ryan, who rarely showed emotion, looked impressed. "How did you know how to do that?" Jake asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Caleb shrugged, standing up and brushing dust off his hands. "Years of practice," he said simply. "When you've been stranded on a planet full of alien tech, you learn to adapt or die." Laura looked guilty, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she mumbled. "I thought I was helping." "You almost got us killed," Ryan snapped, his tone harsh but not unkind. "Next time, think before you act." Jake placed a reassuring hand on Laura's shoulder. "We're all learning," he said gently, "and we're still here because of Caleb." Caleb ignored the praise, his focus already shifting to the task at hand. "This place is dangerous," he said, his voice firm. "We should leave while we still can," but Jake shook his head. "Not yet," he insisted. "This machine could change everything for humanity. If we can figure out how to use it safely, we could unlock new ways to explore the galaxy. Isn't that worth the risk?" Caleb met Jake's gaze, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, but if things go sideways again, don't expect me to save you twice." With that, the group regrouped, determined to uncover the secrets of the ancient structure. Laura worked tirelessly to decode the symbols, jotting down notes and theories as fast as she could. Jake assisted her, using his engineering skills to piece together how the machine functioned. Ryan kept watch, ensuring they weren't caught off guard again, while Caleb patrolled the perimeter, his senses attuned to any potential threats. Hours passed, and gradually, they began to understand the machine's purpose. It was indeed a gateway, a wormhole generator capable of connecting distant points in space. Activating it required immense energy, more than their ship's reserves could provide. Using it would mean sacrificing their ability to leave the planet, unless they found another power source. The realization hit them hard. They faced a choice: stay and unlock the mysteries of the structure, or leave and abandon their mission. The decision weighed heavily on all of them, sparking heated debates. "We can't risk staying here," Ryan argued. "This place is a death trap. We've already seen what it's capable of. But think about what we stand to gain," Jake countered. "This could be humanity's first step toward becoming a galactic civilization. How can we walk away from that?" Laura hesitated, torn between her scientific curiosity and her survival instincts. "There's so much we don't know," she admitted. "If we rush into this, we might make a mistake we can't undo." Caleb, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "If you decide?" The group sat in silence, the weight of Caleb's words pressing down on them. 2 days, that was all the time they had to decide whether to stay or leave. The decision wasn't just about their survival. It was about what kind of legacy they wanted to leave behind. For Jake, the choice felt clear. He couldn't turn his back on something so monumental, no matter the risks. but he knew others might not share his perspective. Ryan paced back and forth, his jaw clenched tight. "We're running out of options," he said finally, breaking the quiet. "If we use the ship's power reserves to activate the machine, we're stuck here. No way around it." Laura nodded, her face pale but resolute. "I know it's dangerous," she admitted softly. "But if we walk away now, we'll never know what this thing can do. We'll never know how far humanity could go." Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That's exactly why we have to stay," he said firmly. "This isn't just about us, it's about everyone back home. Think about what this technology could mean for Earth. Faster travel, new resources, answers to questions we've been asking for centuries." Ryan shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "And what happens if we screw up? What if activating the machine tears a hole in spacetime or calls down some alien army we can't fight? Then what?" Caleb, who had been leaning against one of the chamber walls, pushed himself upright. "He's got a point," he said gruffly. "You're playing with forces you don't understand. This planet's already tried to kill you twice. You really want to test its patience again?" Jake glanced at Caleb, then at Laura and Ryan. He could see the conflict in their eyes, hope warring with fear, ambition clashing with caution. "We didn't come all this way to give up," he said quietly. "Not when we're so close." Laura took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she held her scanner. Maybe there's another way," she suggested hesitantly. "What if we only use part of the ship's power, enough to send a signal back to Earth instead of opening a full wormhole? That way, we can call for reinforcements without stranding ourselves completely." Ryan frowned, considering the idea. "It's risky," he said after a moment, "but it might work. If we can get help here, we won't have to rely solely on ourselves." Jake nodded eagerly. "Exactly. It gives us a chance to finish what we started without cutting off our only way out." Caleb crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Fine," he said finally. "Do what you want. But remember, when things go wrong, don't blame me." The plan was set. Over the next day, the group worked tirelessly to prepare the ship and modify its systems. Jake focused on rerouting the power supply, ensuring that enough energy remained to sustain life support during their wait for rescue. Laura coordinated with him, double-checking every calculation to minimize the risk of failure. Ryan kept watch outside, scanning the jungle for any signs of danger, while Caleb patrolled the perimeter, his blade always within reach. As they worked, tensions ran high. Every small setback felt like a potential disaster, and the constant threat of predators loomed over them. At one point, Ryan spotted movement in the trees and fired a warning shot, startling a pack of smaller creatures into retreat. The incident left everyone on edge, a reminder of how fragile their situation truly was. By the time they finished, exhaustion had taken its toll, but there was no time to rest. They gathered in the ship's cockpit, watching as Jake initiated the sequence to divert power to the ancient machine. The console lit up, humming with energy as the ship's systems began to drain. Outside, the crystalline core pulsed brighter, responding to the surge of power. "It's working," Laura whispered, her voice filled with awe. On the monitor, a faint signal appeared, a beacon broadcasting their location and the data they had collected so far. It would take weeks, possibly months, for anyone to receive it and respond. Until then, they were on their own. As the process completed, the ship fell silent, its engines dormant. Jake slumped back in his seat, relief washing over him. "We did it," he said, a tired smile spreading across his face. "Now we just have to hold out until help arrives." Caleb stood near the doorway, his arms still crossed. "Don't celebrate too soon," he warned. "This place doesn't forgive mistakes, and neither does time. You've bought yourselves a chance, but that's all it is." His words sobered the group, reminding them that their fight wasn't over yet. They still had to survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive, and given the dangers of the planet, that was far from guaranteed. Over the following days, the group settled into a routine. Jake and Laura continued studying the machine, documenting everything they could in hopes of speeding up the process once help arrived. Ryan maintained strict security protocols, ensuring that the camp remained fortified against attacks. And Caleb, true to his word, prepared to leave. On the morning of the second day, Caleb packed his gear, strapping his blade securely to his back. He didn't say much, moving with quiet efficiency as he readied himself for departure. When he finally turned to face the group, his expression was unreadable. "I'm heading out," he announced simply. "There's nothing left for me here." Jake stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "You don't have to go," he said earnestly. "We owe you our lives. Stay with us until help comes." Caleb shook his head, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I've spent years surviving on this rock. I don't need your charity or your company. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on this place until your people show up." Laura looked at him, her eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Caleb shrugged, brushing off the sentiment. "Just doing what I have to." With that, he turned and walked toward the jungle, disappearing. into the shadows without looking back. The group watched him go, each lost in their own thoughts. Jake felt a pang of sadness, knowing they might never see Caleb again, but he also felt a renewed sense of determination. Caleb had given them a chance not just to survive, but to succeed. Now it was up to them to make the most of it. As the days turned into weeks, the group held fast to hope. They fortified their position, rationed their supplies, and stayed vigilant against the ever-present dangers of the planet. And though the wait was grueling, they never lost sight of their goal. Finally, one evening, a faint light appeared on the horizon. It grew brighter, resolving into the shape of a spacecraft descending through the atmosphere. Help had arrived. Jake stood at the edge of the clearing, his heart pounding with excitement and relief. As the ship touched down, its ramp lowered, revealing a team of rescuers clad in sleek uniforms. They moved quickly, securing the area and approaching the group. With cautious professionalism, "We received your signal," one of them said, stepping forward. "Are you the exploration team?" Jake nodded, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "Yes," he replied, "and we've got something you need to see." As the rescuers escorted them aboard the ship, Jake cast one final glance at the jungle. Somewhere out there, Caleb was still fighting his own battles, alone but unbroken. Jake didn't know if they would ever meet again, but he knew one thing for certain. Caleb Stone was a man who refused to be forgotten. Back on board the rescue ship, the group shared their findings, explaining the significance of the ancient machine and the potential it held for humanity's future. Their discovery would change everything, opening doors to new worlds and possibilities beyond imagination. But as the ship lifted off, leaving the planet behind, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was only the beginning. Out there, among the stars, lay countless mysteries waiting to be uncovered. And somewhere, on that harsh and unforgiving world, Caleb Stone stood ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, vast and unknown. For the first time in a long time, Jake felt hopeful.